I'll start by providing some additional data about data sharing and linking, specifically related to the research data that are created as part of research and are published together with scientific articles. And we can see that the practice of data sharing and data linking is actually growing. So if we look at the chart on the left-hand side, we can see the orange line representing the number of articles that are published every year at the global level. This is as captured by Elsevier's databases, Scopus, Cyval, Data Monitor, which is our database of research data sets. So we can see that the organic growth of scientific publications is around 3% over the past 10 years. But if we zoom in into the articles that have linked data sets, and that's the blue line, and the blue line is plotted against the vertical axis on the right-hand side. So they look close, but there's actually 2 orders of magnitude of difference between the orange line and the blue line. However, even if the absolute number of articles with data sets is much, much smaller, we see that the growth is much higher. So the researchers are embracing the practice of data sharing and linking. And this is, of course, due to the publishers on one hand, to the funders issuing data policies, like the NIH has just issued their data policy, and also, of course, the researchers finding this useful, hopefully. And if we look at the impact that those articles with data sets have, we can see that there's a positive correlation with international collaboration as well as citation impact. So that's the chart on the right-hand side. Although the total number of articles with linked data sets accounts for 1% of the total scientific output over the entire period, we can see that on average, those articles tend to be produced by teams that are more international. And we know that international collaboration is a good thing for science. And on average, they tend to have a higher impact, a fact that has also been demonstrated by other studies like that from Kolavica and others that has been published a couple of years ago. Next slide, please. So this shows why it's important to share data. And when you share data, you also want to be recognized for that, whether you're the funder that has funded the research or the researchers that have done the research, or the institution that is where the research has taken place. But which poses the problem of tracking the data sets. So asking the question, where is your data? We've done a study that has shown that even if institutions have repositories where researchers can publish their data sets, the fact is, and of course we all know that, the researchers will publish their data set where in the best suitable venue, which might be domain-specific repositories or maybe other generalist repositories, meaning that over 90% or about 90% of the data sets will be published outside the institution, making it difficult for the institution to keep track of those data sets. Next slide, please. This is particularly difficult because if we look at the quality of the metadata of the data sets, there's a lot of gaps, specifically in as regards affiliation metadata. So if we look at the data monitor corpus, where we collect dataset metadata from over 1,500 data repositories, there's 18 million data sets. Only 10% of those data sets have at least one affiliation address, a string, in the dataset metadata mentioning an institution. And only 1% of those data sets have a persistent identifier. And we all know that persistent identifiers are the right way to link research entities, whether it's data sets, publications, researchers, institutions, etc. So there's only 1%. And if we look at the adoption of persistent identifiers by the repositories, because of course there's many stakeholders and each one has to do their job. So next slide, please. I want to call out Dryad, the other initiative that is keeping Daniela very busy, because some time ago, Dryad has started to consistently adopt institution identifiers, and they're using ROR in their dataset metadata. And we have seen that this has led to a dramatic improvement in the coverage and the quality of affiliation metadata, making it easier to track data sets published in Dryad repositories. And we see an example here from Data Monitor, where we are searching data sets attributed to a certain institution with that ROR ID, and we can find 568 data sets, almost all of which are coming from Dryad, actually, from many Dryad instances. You can see that on the left under sources, which is good. But unfortunately, Dryad is only one repository, and there's thousands of repositories out there. So what about the other repositories? Next slide, please. That's where data science can help, and an analytical approach can help. So what we are doing in Data Monitor, for example, is taking these 18 million data sets. Well, first of all, we filter and deduplicate the corpus of source metadata, because there's, of course, a lot of multiple versions of the same data set, for example, or content that is tagged as data set, but is not really a data set. So we clean it up, and then we enrich it by using other data sets, other sources of information, and other signals that we can use to enrich the data set metadata. And at the end of the pipeline, what we get is that we are able to double the number of data sets that have an affiliation string. But what's really remarkable is that we are multiplying the number of data sets with at least one persistent identifier for institutions by 20-fold. Because whenever we add an institution information, we add both the name as well as the ID. So you can see this growth. If you look at the next slide, if you run the same search, adding another institution ID that is associated to the same institution, in this case, it's the SciVal ID, that is a result of the enrichment. And you can see that the number of results has multiplied by a factor of 20. And you can see on the right-hand side, a much longer list of repositories where we've been able to track data sets coming from that institution, so that that institution will be able to collect those data sets and use them to showcase their results, or even make them even more discoverable. Next slide, please, which is my last slide. So to conclude, data sharing is growing, and it contributes to collaboration and academic impact. And we all play a role in making sure that this continues to grow. Metadata make data count. So it's very important that the quality of the metadata, even metadata that might not seem that important to researchers, like the affiliation, for example, it's important that it's there because it contributes to dataset discoverability, attribution, showcasing, and the reward mechanism that we are trying to build. The right way of doing that is by using persistent identifiers. We all know that in the community, and kudos to the repositories that have done steps in that direction. But when persistent identifiers are not available, analytical approaches and data science approaches can be used to improve metadata quality and further enable tracking, reporting, and showcasing. And that was my last slide. Thank you very much.